same old trouble, villains always knocking at the door. Pretty pictures on the page, but nothing ever stays the same.
Thank you, Vandello, and welcome once again to Graphically Novel. My name is Josh Wasta, a.k.a. Fallout Fieri, and with me, as always, is my octopus.
This one I also saw coming.
He was watching the whole time.
We was watching, boss.
It's fair.
And with us, as usual, is our Femme Fatale, the lovely and talented Ms. Jennifer Howland.
Toilets are always funny.
Right?
Toilets are always funny.
Thank you, Bear. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest. Today we have Mark Paar with us. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, this is your first time on Graphically Novel. We will be discussing The Spirit, which I remembered in my hazy memory in college as you recommending this movie to me. Maybe a little after college.
Probably a little after college. I think it came out in like 2008.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I graduated in 2010, so you know. But this is your first Graphically Novel production. So, can you give us a little bit of your comic book history?
So, my comic book history kind of starts with, back in the 90s when I was a wee lad, Saturday morning cartoons, honestly. The X-Men cartoon and the Spider-Man cartoon that aired were really my introduction to comics. And I didn't actually get into reading comics until like around college age, just virtue of having an excellent comic book store that was nearby and had a good host, good owner that was really encouraging to expanding stuff. And like I had always enjoyed a lot of the translations, the cartoons, the movies and stuff like that. But I really dug deep in college into the comic books themselves.
So what are your big comics? What do you really enjoy?
The big ones, I'm definitely more of a Marvel fan. Spider-Man, absolutely 100%. My favorite hero, followed pretty decently by Hulk. I love it should kind of tell you that I kind of love that idea of power and what you do with it, and whether how do you control it, how do you apply it.
Yeah, we in researching another podcast that you'll be on for Secret Wars, I just showed Bear a panel with Maestro and a bunch of Hulks, and he calls his Hulk army the World Breakers, and all of them jump off of this ship, all yelling "Smash!"
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read that. I hear that's a completely messed up graphic novel, but I have to see this moment.
Awesome. Well, so today we're going before DC, before Marvel. We're going all the way back, and in fact, this may be one of the oldest. This is older than Charles Addams. At least Eisner is. Will Eisner, who is the grandfather of the modern graphic novel. Tons of different stories, but The Spirit, definitely one of his most famous. Just a very specific style, just something that is replicated everywhere. So Mark, do you was this the first Will Eisner you had ever read?
Yeah, it was actually the first one from him that I hadn't really dug into, and it's
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's definitely a ride. It's definitely a unique take on the format and the genre.
Bear, Jen, any experience with any other Eisner?
I don't think so. Like we've read a lot, but I don't remember this name coming up before.
Yeah, I recognize the name, but I couldn't tell you why. And if we have not read it for this show, then no. I have not read it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
you probably recognize the name because of the Eisner Awards,
right? Which is the graphic novel award. Because again, godfather of the modern graphic novel. He did things like The Spirit, especially in the 40s into the 50s. But then he was one of the first people to do long form storytelling. So he just released a graphic novel called A Contract with God that was basically like it was an all-in-one. So it wasn't released in issues. It was just a graphic novel. So he was one of the first ones to do that as well. Although they didn't call it, it was also the first to use the term graphic. But this movie, Bear, I'm gonna move to you because you've been insisting.
I have. I've been insisting pretty much since we started this podcast and before that this was a movie that you needed to see.
It's true. It's true.
Also, if there's anybody out there that is still vampire LARPing, you need to watch this movie because you will see the best and probably only real video depiction of a pack of blood brothers. Like,
true.
This is what I envision anytime anybody starts talking about vampire LARPing and they start talking about, Sabbat stuff. I'm like, oh, let me tell you about the best pack of blood brothers I've ever seen. It's in this movie. It's called The Spirit. You need to watch it.
We was watching.
The movie itself is just I've been watching it. Probably I didn't see it in the theater, but I kind of discovered it on Netflix when Netflix was still doing DVDs and such. Yes, I'm that old. I'm sure they still are. I don't know if anybody really does that anymore, but I kind of discovered it somewhere along there, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I mean, how do you not? It's Samuel L. Jackson. You've got the cast is
Charlie Johansson.
Johansson. I can't even.
Gabriel Mock.
Yep.
What was that, Mark?
Oh, I was just saying Gabriel mocked.
See, I didn't really recognize him from other things.
He's kind of in and out, but the other really prominent thing that he did was the show Suits.
Okay, see, I haven't seen that. But yeah. I mean, Frank Miller shows up as himself. You have this is the time where like Eva Mendes was on the rise.
Yeah.
And I don't remember seeing her in much stuff more recently, but like this era is why I know her name.
Yeah.
Well,
she was involved in a lot of kind of comic book movies, wasn't she?
She was in 300 too, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
Yes.
Okay, well this is also Frank Miller. So
yeah,
Frank Miller was the writer artist, of 300 and Sin City, and then this was his interpretation of one of the original noir comics, which we'll talk a little bit about the script, the comic, but just to know it was a strip. So much like Charles Addams, when we discussed the Addams Family, I mean, we can't really talk about a specific plot, but we can definitely say the one that we read for this is called Femme Fatales. I also had one that was like an 80th anniversary that came out recently. I know Mark has a pop-up book that he found.
Well, I want to point out in the preface of the graphic novel that we read, it talked about how it was considered a strip, but it wasn't traditionally what you would think of as a strip. It was an insert.
Right.
I actually read about it in the 80th anniversary collection. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so it was an insert. It was actually like a proper like comic book insert into the Sunday paper.
Oh, that's cool. I missed that. I didn't read the forwards. I just kind of jumped in.
Yeah, it was like 7 pages of actual like comic book.
Yeah, I mean it was like,
and that expanded out to like 16 pages by the end of the run.
Yeah, but so it was not quite as robust as a comic book issue.
Right.
But that was the format in which it was presented. Like a comic.
I was kind of surprised at how, just reading through it, how dense the text was. In pretty much every, we'll call it episode, every issue. There's a lot of talking going on. There's a lot of action going on. You rarely have a panel that isn't busy doing something.
So the other weird kind of part of this is this comic was at the same time a product of its time and in places very, very racist.
Absolutely.
But surprisingly forward thinking, specifically when it came to the female characters.
Yes.
Which is reflected in the movie because the villain that escapes is Scarlett Johansson's character is Floss. I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, even the chief at one point, just after Morgenstern breaks out this comically oversized gun, kind of just goes and looks into, is every goddamn woman in this goddamn city out of their goddamn minds?
Right. And I mean, and it does reflect the comic because, again, you start in the 40s and you go through. It wasn't in what we read, but in my research, I found out that there was a character in the 40s called Ebony White, who was basically the African American Jim Crow era character with full lips and everything else that era kind of would do. So, I mean, not a perfect history by any means, but
was Ebony White a woman or a man?
A man. Yeah, it was an African American man, and in fact, you can see right here.
Yeah, he pops up in several.
Oh no, that's blackface.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
It's. And I mean, he is literally, he's dressed like you would see like a carnival, like a carnival barker with his like accordion and his monkey dancing. He is dressed like the monkey. All of the text for his speech is written as if some really, well, as if some Caucasian is trying to write out what English would sound like coming out of a black man's mouth in that era. Like everything's really just, you know,
I mean,
yes, massa, and you know, it's and he does.
And I mean, it's definitely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say. I mean, it's definitely good to call out that kind of racist depiction, because I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's a racist depiction, but it's also not unique. I mean, if you look at like even like Marvel's history, like
absolutely, like early Luke Cage was written by a black man, or was written by a white man, you know, and was basically trying to jump into blaxploitation and get some of that money. It's just something that I wanted to make sure to call out, because if people are interested in this, there are, you know, it's supernatural Dick Tracy is the best way to explain the Spirit, because the Spirit himself is supernatural, but the situations he runs into generally are not.
And was this written? I think this was written before Dick Tracy, wasn't it? I didn't get the time to actually research that.
I think it's contemporary, because at least one of the stories written in the 80th collection it references Nick Stacy, another comic book character.
Man, do you want to get sued?
Yeah, the shit. Dick Tracy started in 1931, so 9 years before the Spirit.
Oh, okay.
Well, and I have to tell
Another possible future.
One of the reasons that I kind of drug my feet about doing this on the show was I was like, oh God, it's like Dick Tracy. I grew up reading Dick Tracy, and then when was it the 90s when they made the movie with Madonna and whatever, and I was
Warren Beatty, yeah.
God, no.
Walnuts is good for the liver.
No.
I love that movie.
It's good for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was like, oh, I don't want to see this movie.
You were grinding your teeth because you thought I was going to show you shit.
It was, but you know how much he loves the Dick Tracy movie. So I was like, well, this is probably going to be something that Josh really likes. And I was just like, oh, hell no, I love this shit. I mean, first of all, Samuel L. Jackson as the villain. How can you go wrong?
Well, I mean, I swear, like, there's some potentially apocryphal stories about like Jim Carrey's movies have some points in the script where it just says Jim Carrey proceeds to act like Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Or Robin Williams was famous for improvising. I feel like they told Samuel L. Jackson to go full Samuel L. Jackson, to just turn it up to 11, be as completely nuts, unhinged, overly energetic as he possibly could be, and he did it.
That's just damn weird.
But I think that's probably true. But I also recognize that Samuel L. Jackson is a huge nerd, and he loves comics and would know, like, if you look at his character here and in the like Unbreakable, Glass, those movies, he knows how to be that over the top villain.
Well, we just discussed him in the American version of Old Boy.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think on that episode we also talked about you can tell when Samuel L. Jackson is really just enjoying himself. Like, there's Samuel L. Jackson, the very serious actor, and he has some awesome roles where he is taking it seriously, and he's like, we're sticking to the subject, we're doing. And then there's the movies where he's like, oh yeah?
I get to have fun?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Snakes on a Plane, Kong Skull Island.
Yeah.
This, you know, like it's a Kingsman.
Yeah, Kingsman.
I actually, I was gonna bring up Kingsman like later when we talked a bit more about the movie, because there's a lot of visual similarities of some of the over the top graphic violence that's depicted.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Although I will say Kingsman is gorier with it, whereas the Spirit, just by the very nature of the black and white that they're
black
doing,
and white definitely gives you the more
Yeah.
in your own mind.
Right.
Well, I mean, yeah, and and the big thing, like, it's made by the Frank Miller, like you said, and just so it has that really hyper stylized black and white, and so it's kind of
Yes.
yeah, and then but then it like, and of course Kingsman is in full vivid living color.
Yes.
Right.
But a lot of like the explosions and some of the limb cutoffs and things like that are kind of, I mean, it's definitely Frank Miller style, but it's also reminiscent, like Kingsman almost kind of harkens back to that same style.
Yeah, definitely.
Enhanced, color corrected. You can practically taste the brain matter.
But yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, and obviously Kingsman also came later. Kingsman was 2014, was the first one with the very famous church scene. Which, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, it's a really good point, Mark, because I'm thinking if the church scene was done in black and white.
And red.
Well, I mean,
because that's important. That's very Frank Miller.
Just the highlight, because you see that in Sin City too. Sometimes it's not black, white, and red. Sometimes it's black, white, and the blue of her eyes, or
right,
or the yellow,
right.
Yeah. And Sin City, the Spirit does the same thing. Of like when he falls into the river of the blue fish, everything with Lorelei has that white and the specks of blue and that very bright, and then of course, like, Jen says the red on his tie.
Right. Well,
it's always that one color that stands out.
Yeah. And the characters that are in the movie, I was actually really surprised for something that in 2008 probably wasn't as well known. And they put it out. You might also be tempted, as we've seen in other things, to kind of either make up characters whole cloth to add to the world, or do something really outside of what the comic would do. All of these characters are in the comic. Octopus in the comic, Plaster Parrot's in the comic, Silk and Floss, Sans Serif. Like, all these people are pulling specifically from the source material, and that's awesome. It's an awesome way to kind of showcase them.
And I really like that they kept those characters and those very, very unique names.
Yeah.
Because like that's part of the Spirit's world, part of Will Eisner's style, but it's also harkening back to just the noir genre in general. But also, if you look even further back, radio dramas, the melodramas, where every character has an alliterative name or something that's just off of being a straight up pun, like Sans Serif.
Right. I mean, and I mean, obviously there's a deeper rogues gallery for the Spirit that wasn't in the movie, and looking into it, I'm like, there was probably my favorite was Hazel P. Macbeth, who's a witch. And she has a Shakespearean motif, so she only speaks in iambic pentameter.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
We're getting exercise.
Or there's
that comic.
Right.
Or there's the Arson Pyre.
Arson Pyre. Yep.
The most literally named villain I have ever heard, because his name is literally Arson and he sets things on fire.
Right. Yeah. Darling O'Shea, who is the richest and most spoiled person in the world.
It really makes you step back and go, maybe Marvel isn't so bad with their teleporter named Telford Porter.
That's right. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well,
There's a long and storied history.
Yes, it's just going back to the roots of comic. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and alliteration has always been. I mean, you look at DC.
Alliteration is fucking cool.
Clark Kent, Lois Lane, Peter Parker, J. Jonah Jameson.
Bruce Banner,
Wade Wilson. I mean, just
Wade Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, it
Thanks,
just
Marvel.
Yeah. Well, thanks Marvel, thanks DC. Dick Tracy did it to a point with real names, but Dick Tracy didn't have that many real names. Like Pruneface was just Pruneface. Mm-hmm. You never really found out Pruneface's real name because who cares?
Because Pruneface.
Because Pruneface.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially the older comics like Dick Tracy and the Spirit, the villains didn't really exist outside of their villainous roles. It's not like a lot of our more modern stuff. We have these really deep storied backstories of villains that make them sympathetic or explain why they're wanting to rule / destroy the world.
Right, or make them
and
scarier.
so that we can identify with them. We can see, either to make them scarier or to make them sympathetic. Like Black Panther, the movie of Black Panther is a really great example of
Killmonger.
Really, the villain was right. He just was doing it the wrong way.
Right.
But in the old school comics, the bad guys were just bad guys. They didn't exist outside of being a foil to the hero and being someone for the hero to beat and be victorious and show that good will always triumph, because good is what's good for the world.
Right. And we touched on that a little bit in our Justice League episode, because Kat Essman talked about how the reason that she is a DC fan is every once in a while you just want to read something and know that the good guy's going to win. Like, there's no shades of gray. There's no
questioning, am I doing the right thing?
Right. There are good guys, there are bad guys, and the good guys win after a little bit of a struggle. And
I mean, I can absolutely empathize with that, because I'm the same way, because sometimes you want the good guys to be good and you want the bad guys to be bad and you want the good guys to win.
Right. I mean, in our house, generally that's less the comic books we read and more the shows that we watch. Like, we watched 2 episodes of The Nevers yesterday, and I was like, okay, I need something a little lighter, and I started going through and I was like, oh yeah, we haven't watched more of Pose, and I'm like, that is not light. Like,
well, and that's the other thing is that we have a tendency to gravitate towards shows that may on the surface appear to be, lighthearted nothing burgers as far as intellectual property, but like The Nevers, it's talking about women's rights. It's talking about British white male patriarchy and imperialism, and and it's not shying away from it. And it's not, it's getting right to the heart of it. So it was not the easy, like, oh, let's watch this show, this kind of crazy show about people having weird powers. Oh shit, this is pretty serious.
Then we watched a supervillain host Saturday Night Live. Because Elon Musk was on last night.
And again,
so actually,
we'll get into the philosophical debate. The right versus wrong. We've got electric cars, but is he really a good guy?
There are people who believe he is the savior of our planet.
Well, the people thought the same thing about Trump, and look where it got us.
Yeah, but they think this way not because of how he intends to do things; it's his contribution to society.
Well, people thought the same thing about Bill Gates. And he started off as a thief, so.
Bring us back, Mark.
So bringing it back. So something that Jen said about the Nevers, telling a story about like women's rights and the British male patriarchy. Will Eisner really specialized in that as well back when he was writing The Spirit and all of his other comics. They talked about it briefly in one of the forwards on in that 80th anniversary edition that every story could see to have some kind of deeper meaning. Yes, they were entertaining detective stories, but like one of his stories, he throws in a bunch of product placement for this fake hair tonic that he made up that was kind of criticizing the commercialization of media, about how commercials were appearing into everything and more and more and more. And
right.
I mean, you look at modern TV, like before the advent of streaming, and you'd get a 30-minute time slot, but a 22-minute episode, which means about nearly a third of that was dedicated to commercials and product placement.
Right, absolutely.
And I feel like the streaming services that have commercials, it's more than that.
It kind of depends.
Yeah, because
Hulu does that. They didn't used to be as bad. You maybe got 5 minutes, if that, of commercials, but now it's getting worse.
I'm trying to remember, what were we watching, Josh, that it was like, in the beginning, you watched like 10 minutes of the show, and then they did like maybe 90 seconds of commercial.
Yeah, it was like,
and then it was like
seconds,
7 minutes of show.
It's because it was
90 minutes of 90 seconds of commercials.
It's because we were watching it on a free service.
It was so bad.
It wasn't Pluto.
I know the CW app was really egregious about it.
The CW app is horrible because it plays the same commercial 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
But
Crackle does stuff like
Crackle.
That too.
I think it's Crackle.
I think it was on Crackle. But it was so bad because it was timed, and there was no consideration given to where the show stopped.
Oh yeah, you'd be right in the middle of a sentence.
Right in the middle of a word.
Yeah.
And
I mean, at least with like the shows we grew up with, the 90s and stuff, they had deliberate commercial breaks, and then it would cut at that point.
Right.
You could get the commercial, it would come back and pick up. They would do it in
the
a scene
shows were
shift,
written
like
for a commercial break.
Mm.
Like you literally had.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching The Masked Singer. If I wasn't streaming The Masked Singer, I would never be able to watch The Masked Singer. Like
Yeah, because it's always like, come back after.
right back.
Who is this person that we're going to reveal? We'll find out
Right
after
after
this.
this, yeah.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
thank you for aging me like 40 years just with that.
You're welcome. That's what I'm good at. I'm even older than you, so Bear's older than all of us.
I mean,
Jen's older
older
than all of us.
I'm older than all. Jen is not older than all of us.
I am ancient,
Okay, well, if you want to go that route,
ever present.
I was going to be the one that's just like, no, she's not older than us. But
all right. So bringing you back again.
Yes.
So one of the things I actually wanted to talk about was the setting for this movie, yeah, and just how genius I feel it is, because it does the black and white and color splash that is kind of Frank Miller style and is very evocative of that noir thing, and of course the clothes and the buildings are all very much built in that noir aesthetic of it looks like the 40s, but then you look at the technology that they're using, and there are cell phones, flip phones, like that can flip open to show video and stuff like that. There's laptops and all of that. And I love that personally, because it shows that noir isn't a time period. It's its own genre. That is evocative of that time period, but not beholden to it.
Well, yeah, and that's what the millennials are going to be thinking of us here, in another like 20 years is how we did things.
Well, the millennials think of us that way right now because they're in their 30s.
I really liked the movie.
Me being a millennial.
But I really liked the movie and the setting because being from Chicago, it really felt like Chicago, but also because if you know geography of Chicago is basically, it just sits on top of Indiana. And Indiana was like the gross swampy areas in the movie. And then the buildings were like Chicago. You shake your head and laugh, but I will take you to these places and show you.
You've already taken me to Indiana once.
No,
Indiana.
Yeah, well, that's not the.
No, I've been to Indiana once, and I agree with her.
Well,
I grew up in Indiana, and I agree with her.
Thank you.
We apologize to our Indiana listeners who, for some reason, have not escaped Indiana.
Well, but southern Indiana, like near Kentucky, I like it there.
Okay.
Oh no, it's beautiful country down there.
And
That's where I grew up.
everybody that lives in Valpo loves Valpo.
But getting back to the style, I completely agree. Like this, more than I think anything else that I've watched, shows that noir can be a modern genre, because like the computers in the police station or the cell phones, all those things, they didn't take me out of the movie because they were so fully integrated into my experience that they didn't seem out of place, which was awesome.
Well, I mean, it's nothing else. They didn't do this, like going back to 90s cartoons. The Batman the Animated Series had this weird mix of anachronistic technology, because they were using Tommy guns, but also personal computers and all
Zeppelins were in the air.
Yes.
Yeah, like the police had Zeppelins,
right,
to help search for criminals. It was this weird hodgepodge mishmash of different technological levels, which, I mean, watching that as a kid, I didn't notice, I didn't care at all. Just it looked cool, and that was enough for me.
Right.
But the spirit definitely very clearly takes place in a modern noir setting.
Right. When you're in the hospital, you can see in the background that they're, modern for the time, machines, and there's computers around, but it's never like
really anything in the foreground.
Yeah.
Like it's
with the exception of the one time where they open the cell phone.
Right. Yeah. When Morgenstern shows up. pops up and shows the video of Sand going, "I hate cops."
Right. You know, and even when they're being interviewed when they're kids, the whole kids thing seems like they're in the 40s up until that reporter walks up with a microphone and a camera behind him.
Yeah.
And he has the very like it's essentially like a 90s camera.
Yeah.
Which, you know, considering the movie came out in 2008 for them being kids.
It's the costuming. It's the clothing. That even in the modern day of the movie, the clothing is very, you know, well, I mean, men's clothing hasn't changed that much in 150 years.
Right.
So, you know, it's easy to view the feeling, but the clothing of the women was much more of a 40s, 50s feel.
Very much so.
Than a modern day feel.
Right.
Even though they had the you know, so I think that they did a lot with costume, but they also did it in a way, not where it was like, why would someone in 2008 wear that? I never got that feeling at all.
Right.
Because it was stylized enough that you were like, that's completely something I might see someone wearing.
Yeah, especially Silk and Floss and Sans Serif, their styles.
When you see Sand pop up on the copier,
Yeah,
and you know you get the photocopy that she pulls, and that is obviously a very modern copy machine, you know, and it's not detracted from at all. You're actually just sitting there looking at her dress, going, I get this thing.
But the rest of the office is your typical noir, like crime scene,
bare bones,
like huge,
big windows with stark lighting.
Yeah, gargantuan space with a single desk and a copier. Like, you know, you have to walk across nothing for 30 seconds before you get
the office of the art dealer.
Yeah.
Okay, well that makes sense then, because a gallery would be a big open space.
Right, but that's the same way in other areas.
Sure.
In just about everything, like there's gargantuan amounts of space and very little furnishings, which is it depicts a very noir, you know, kind of aesthetic.
There were two instances of costuming that made me go, what the fuck are they doing? And it was all in the same scene, actually. It was the Nazi uniform and Paris of Plaster's belly dancing outfit. That's she's an assassin that dresses. She's a French assassin that dresses as a belly dancer. Yeah. That was the only time that I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, the Nazi imagery and stuff, that was definitely a little out of place.
Yeah.
It kind of seemed like I mean, back in 2008, it was still the era of, if you make your villains Nazis, then of course everyone's going to hate them.
You know, I have to say though, to me, that wasn't taking me out, and that wasn't like shocking. It was funny because it's a black man dressed as a Nazi, and with the barest knowledge of Nazi culture, you're like, they'd murder you.
Right.
Like,
well, I'm not saying that it like took me out of the moment. It just made me. It was like I don't understand at this point in the movie why are we bringing Nazis? Is this because he's into genetic research?
Because we're so over the top.
Yeah.
Is really like,
I honestly think it was more of an ideology, like I'm going to rule the world, and like I'm taking ideas from here, and I need regiment, I didn't
even see it as ideology. To me, it was parody, and it was parody to the point of Mel Brooks.
Yeah,
like it was.
Well, I mean, okay, I was going to say, well, I mean, if you look at the era of the original comic, like it started in what, 39.
40,
Josh?
1940.
So at the inception of this comic, I mean, of course, a lot of the bad guys are going to be Nazis, because the bad guys of the United States were Nazis, especially in that first decade of this comic. So that I admittedly, I didn't find any comics where the Spirit is fighting Nazis, but I didn't do that deep of a dive into the 80-year history of this comic.
Well, and I didn't.
But I'm sure it happened.
I'm like, okay, so my point was not that it took me out of the moment. It was, you know, fine. They used it, whatever. But I can see the connections, you know, how Nazis were always like about the supernatural. They were about like, you know, so the octopus is trying to be a god. That is completely in line with what we know the Nazis were trying to do, or at least in, you know, our retelling in fiction,
Right.
that's how we placed the Nazis. Is they were all about, like, I just off the top of my head, I can think of 5 different storylines, completely different storylines in different movies.
Hellboy, Indiana Jones,
I mean,
let's just keep writing down the line, you know?
It's coming. So I get that, but why would, because that was like a stunning reveal in the movie. Like there was no indication of that anywhere at all. And then all of a sudden it's like giant Nazi flag and eagle and everybody's in uniform. And it's like,
I think it's that if you're looking at the scenes in which specifically Octopus and Floss show up,
They're all
themed.
they're all very themed.
They're themed.
Okay.
So I think that's just another villain theme.
okay.
Because they do the mad scientist nurse thing, they do
Yes.
the Nazi,
They do the samurai.
they do the samurai.
Okay.
You know, so it's just the idea is that they're just hopping genres.
That I can buy.
I think they're
It was-
they're looking for the
Nazi-
Imperial.
No, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. Every
Yeah.
scene that they're in, that it's
It's a different
Octopus and
theme.
Silk and Floss, is
Yes.
a different villain genre.
It was just that the Nazi one was so like in your face. You know,
Right.
the others were a bit more subtle.
I-
That one was so.
I don't know. I don't know that I'd call the samurai one subtle.
Yeah, personally for me,
It was much more subtle than like the opening of that one was the giant Nazi flag.
Right,
That
but-
was, you know, the samurai one. Yeah, they're all dressed like this and their swords and okay, yeah, we're gonna do that.
I think it's that there are 3 parts to it. Samuel
that'll
Jackson
wake
shows
you
up
up in the morning.
Yes. Samuel Jackson shows up in an outfit. Silk and Floss shows up in an outfit that then is completing kind of what you're doing.
That thing.
And one of the clones is killed in the scene in the like fitting
Style.
the style of
Yes.
the genre
Yes.
because the clone has the Iron Eagle fall on him.
Oh, I
Yes,
forgot
right.
about that completely. Yeah.
Yes.
No, Samuel Jackson had the Iron Eagle fall on him.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I literally watched this movie this morning, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
So-
know there was a clone that died there somewhere too, though.
Yeah,
Right.
it was earlier in the scene. I think it was like near the beginning of the scene. But the samurai one, I love that when they're like, I think hentai is appropriate, and this clone is like, okay, and then he's like, this doesn't tickle.
I think you need seppuku.
Yeah, no, they. Oh,
Did
yeah.
you say? Yeah, I was gonna say. Did you say
That's
hentai?
why hentai is very
Yes.
different.
Very.
Although he
very
is the octopus.
different. Yeah, that.
And he does have 8 of everything.
That's true.
Okay, so. Firstly, though, like,
Did you spend your weekend?
All right, so moving on from that Freudian slip.
Hentai Nazis.
right? Personally, for me, I want to, if I ever had the chance to meet Samuel L. Jackson, I want to sit down and ask him, I'm like, what did it feel like to put on a Nazi uniform and do this? Were you actually in it? Was that CGI'd? Like, what did that feel like? I just want to get his feelings on it. And like, out of all the movies that you could talk to Samuel L. Jackson about, I'll be like, this is where I want to, get your insight.
Have I told the Nazi LARPer story on this show?
Yes.
When I was in LA,
Maybe,
somebody showed up
probably.
in a full
Yeah, I feel like
SS Nazi uniform
Ooh,
to play their new character, which was a Nazi Tremere.
did they realize? Did they
We
have
also played in public.
full understanding
We
of what was?
played-
Yeah.
We played in an industrial park in the Los Angeles area, just in the outdoors.
Well, at least it wasn't San Francisco, because
But the best part of that was that I was also debuting a new character, and he was British. And the prince was an NPC that was French, and
I don't think we've talked about this on the show.
the prince demanded that the guy basically take off his uniform in his fort, while also, because it was an NPC, it was the ST who went out of character and went, "No, you cannot wear that. I'm sorry. Go to your car or wherever."
That is not
And take
the
that off.
character that you bring
Right.
in without first
No.
discussing it with the entire ST staff and bringing it up in conversation in the group of, "Hey, I'm going to do this,"
Right.
unless it seriously bothers somebody.
Right. But then
well,
it came
he's
to
dressing as a Nazi. Do you think he fucking cares?
right.
Probably not.
But then it came to me.
I mean, yeah.
The prince is like, and the prince is like, "And who are you?" And I'm like, "Lord John Marbury, Your Grace, of the Allied Nations."
But yeah, no, I mean, it's talking to Samuel L. Jackson. I think like Watson made a good point of like that whole thing was a giant parody. Like
Yeah.
everything that Octopus was doing was either a caricature or a parody of some kind of villainous trope.
Yeah.
Of you failed, so now you have to kill yourself. Or
Right. Evil scientist.
I'm a geneticist, so I'm a Nazi. Therefore, I'm genetic superiority. Blah 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 blah. All of that. So I think any opportunity that we have to make fun of Nazis is one we should probably take.
Yeah.
Fair. Absolutely fair.
And again, having a black man, especially one that's going as balls to the fucking wall as Samuel Jackson is in this movie.
Yes.
Hey Sam, you want to make fun of Nazis? I want to make fun of the Nazis.
When you said I would ask Sam Jackson about that, that was my thought. It was like, do you want to make Nazis look ridiculous? When don't I want to make Nazis look ridiculous?
Right.
So I just feel like that would be, I don't want to obviously put words in anyone's mouth, but that's my feeling.
Yes, but I want to see that reaction. I'll be like, motherfucker, you saw that movie? Let me tell you about that movie. That's what I want to hear him say.
Okay, so we just want to hang out with
So on the subject of that particular scene, that particular scene was really the one that I think that Frank Miller, his penchant for certain things really shine through on that, because like the dissolving cat, or talking like the casual discussion of cruelty to dogs, and then the melting cat where the cat melts off screen, but then it just pops out and you see the eyes rolling around in the dentist tray.
Right. Yeah,
that's very Frank Miller.
Well, also
like
they've established that the spirit is the crazy cat lady.
Yeah, that he's really
his house is filled with cats, so he has an affinity.
Well, I mean, and that makes sense too.
Well, I mean, yes, the whole mythology of the 9 lives, the whole, I mean, there are lots of...
And also the whole Egyptian connection to Bast and perils of death and things like that.
Exactly.
So, one of the other things, we mentioned Sans Serif leaving her butt print copied. I just ran across this in the IMDb trivia, but I seem to now remember it. That was an homage to early Frank Miller Daredevil run, where Elektra does the same thing, and Daredevil says to her, "You shouldn't have signed it." So, like, that whole cloth was taken into the spirit from Daredevil.
It's Frank Miller, so I can't say I'm surprised.
Right.
But just also Ava Mendes's delivery of the "you made a perfect ass of yourself," pulls up the butt print and then looks at it and then just goes, "A perfect ass," staring at her own butt print, and then before she tosses it aside.
In the garbage, yeah. But the thing that I found it amusing that the spirit comes in. He hasn't seen Sans Serif since she was a teenager.
Right.
And yet knows that is a copy of her ass.
Well, I mean, they had already established
that
she
she
had
just
been
pay
there.
attention.
Yeah, asses change, and
I know mine has.
Mine too. But I think because Samuel Jackson is doing such an over the top in this, you don't really notice unless you're really sitting down and analyzing it like we are, that everything in this movie is over the top.
Yeah.
I remember when we finished watching this movie, the first time you actually sat down and watched it with me. I was finally like, no, we're watching this damn movie.
And I wasn't here.
You weren't here.
Sorry. Doing homework.
Yeah, you ran off after we just recorded another episode. But the first thing out of your mouth was, this movie was almost up its own ass.
Almost. It was so close, and it just stayed.
At the top. It just stayed at the top. It just tickled its own ass.
They really tap danced on that line, but I love like you said, everything about this is over the top. Like the scenes with Lorelai, the scene at the end where Sand comes in with the golden fleece and is running in slow mo.
I also love when you realize
honestly the guy who plays Chief Dolan.
Yes.
Kevin's father from the Wonder Years.
The commissioner.
Yes, Kevin's father from the Wonder Years.
But like the emotion, the feeling, the absolute straight-faced enthusiasm that they deliver these noir lines that you'd expect out of some 1940s Humphrey Bogart level movie, and they just say all of it exactly in tone as that you'd expect from those kinds of movies. And it's just everyone is 100% committed to it.
Right. I think also it's interesting because each of these characters are like a caricature of that type, but then the movie gives them more depth.
Yes.
Like the commissioner, you're like, oh, he's the guy
He
that
is the-
yells at everybody.
Yeah, he is the
But then
archetypical.
But then he
Yep.
has more depth.
Yeah.
There is a reason behind, when you learn more about the relationships in the movie.
Right, especially that Dolan was the first one to know
Yes.
who the spirit was.
Yes.
It's such a cool reveal. It's
Yeah.
such a cool little piece of.
Well, and
Well, and it's also, I mean, then that's straight out of the comics too.
Right, it's also canon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they changed a little bit of like the history or like the formation of the spirit, because like apparently it was because he was shot and then he fell into this suspended animation fluid that someone was going to release to take over the city.
Yeah, Dr. Cobra. Yeah.
Yeah, but they condensed it into just making it the octopus. But even in the original like origin story, Dr. Cobra even mentioned, "I'll team up with the world's greatest criminal, the octopus."
Right. Yeah. And I don't remember, was Morgenstern?
Yeah, Morgenstern.
Was Morgenstern in the comic? I don't remember running into her.
I didn't run into her, but at the same time, if she was a relatively minor character that they then just kind of brought in,
Right.
and
Well,
elevated.
and I
Because,
also
if you look at like the Arrow, like the CW series, Felicity Smoke is a token character that gets named in like one issue.
right, that is then elevated.
Well, also, like the comic book had a penchant for actually killing people off.
Yeah.
Because in the graphic novel that we read in Femme Fatales, like the very first issue, you have what was her name? Was it Black Widow? It was Black something. And I don't have it handy either. I'm like, where's the graphic novel?
Yeah.
But the first one, like, she dies at the end of the episode,
Right.
At the end of the issue,
Right.
the run, whatever you want to call it. And they don't have a problem with actually killing people in the comic.
Right. It just
Which honestly makes it even more interesting to see like the fact that I like Josh mentioned that I have a pop-up novel.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, I mean, like just for all of us, kind of that pop-up storybook kind of thing just is intrinsically somehow a for kids thing. But like the spirit itself dealt with some very adult themes. And I mean, yeah, maybe it's like we discussed at the beginning of this episode, a product of its time where they didn't shy away from stuff like that in kids oriented stuff. But at the same time, the spirit was always oriented towards a more adult audience than most comic strips.
Right, and this comic actually turned out to be one of those weird cases where it's easier to find print media of it than it is to find digital at this point. Because I found the 80th anniversary digitally, but found Femme Fatale, and actually there were a few others. Like I could have picked up the 80th anniversary, I found it later, but I'd already bought Femme Fatale and given it to Bear. But at the same time, we got the idea of the comic, from flipping through it. It wasn't like we all had to read the same comic.
I jumped around a lot. I mainly because there were so many, like the graphic.
This movie,
long it went, like it was 200 and some odd pages, I think.
Yeah.
And so I basically just went, okay, I don't have time to read all this. Let's hit the highlights of the characters that are in the movie. Let's read a couple other things just for reference and move on. Sorry, I stepped on you, Mark. What were you trying to say?
Oh, I was going to say I mean, this movie doesn't really adapt any one storyline in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It does definitely take elements from a few of them, like the whole storyline with Sans Serif minus the Golden Fleece is kind of covered in the pop-up book that I have, and it's covered there are specific ones where she pops up in the comics.
She's even referenced in like the Wikipedia or the in all the other things as she is canonically the spirit's childhood friend.
Yeah.
That turns to a life of crime.
Well, and I just feel like for a lot of the movie adaptations we've seen from graphic novels, this one was done really well. I mean, it took part to make a cohesive story for the medium.
And for a modern audience.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing with this is they talk, like, every time that Morgenstern is in a scene or something or pops up, they always mention that she's going to make detectives real quick.
Yes.
And then she did less than a year later.
Right, when she started on Castle.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and I love those little nods and just the things that I don't know. Like, this is almost like Sin City 1.5, because this was done between Sin City 1 and 2, which I'm avoiding a lot of that because we have an entire episode on Sin City and 300 coming up.
Right, but at the same time, it's impossible not to draw those parallels because a lot of it is done in the same style.
Right. Well,
I agree, but I think that, to be honest, I think that the Spirit is much more accessible than Sin City. Like, Sin City...
I'm putting a pin in this, and we will come back to it when we watch Sin City again.
Okay. I was going to say, I've seen Sin City.
Right.
But I think the Spirit is a much more accessible, like, okay, it was the 90s, and Sin City hit all of the weird shit that people wanted to associate with. But I feel like the Spirit was more digestible than Sin City.
And I think a big part of that is the nature of the stories, because the Spirit is, at its core, a noir detective story. And yes, there's a lot of the weirdness and the supernatural elements and things like that, but it's still a detective story.
Right.
Whereas Sin City is the epitome of the dark, gritty, seedy underbelly of blah, 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 blah. That is...
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's also an anthology movie.
Yeah.
So you're not following one character through.
Yes.
And it's not 90s. It was 2005.
Okay, whatever. It still felt 90s.
But when was the book published?
Sin City, the comic.
We should know this.
Yeah.
This was an abandoned episode from like a couple seasons ago.
That up. The other thing I'd like to bring up about the Spirit, the movie, was the Spirit being such a womanizer, quotes, air quotes,
womanizer.
Because when you saw his interaction with women, he was not being a womanizer. He was appreciative of women, but
still respectful.
But the women, like, for whatever reason, there was something about, and maybe it was the whole thing that kept him from dying, but women just, like,
threw themselves
literally
at him.
Yeah. Or they were just like, like there was something there that he was not doing and that women do not do to men normally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, like you said, he never goes out of his way to be like, "What's up?"
Yeah. How you
And
doing?
like even like the reporter is the big one.
But you also
what do you have to say to the women? We hang on your every word. She's already coming on to him.
Right. So I saw him and the way he reacted to women as, like, how do you think you would react if every woman you talked to was like, you're awesome?
Right.
You'd be like, cool.
Yeah. Great that you think that. Awesome.
She would respond positively.
Mm.
You wouldn't be like, no, I got a girl. You wouldn't be like, back off, lady. You'd be like, this is very cool. Thank you for noticing me as a human.
Right.
And like you look at some of the other like womanizer characters in other media, and they go out of their way to be like, hey, look at me, I'm available. I want to, all of that. And the Spirit never really does that. He just, like Jen was pointing out, he accepts the advances. He responds. He doesn't really make those advances on his own.
Exactly.
Well, and he even brings that up, that he's, like you said, an appreciator of women.
Yes.
Which that fits very well into the reputation from the comics, because as we saw in the comic that we had, there was a whole line of femme fatales in the Spirit graphic novel, like going from being villains all the way to trying to seduce him to be a villain with them, to, like everything in between, to like Sans Serif, who's the childhood friend that he wants to bring back from that line, it's just really, really well done. And I think even though this is a 1940s comic and a 2008 movie, I think a lot more directors and writers could pay attention to this to see how to do a respectful, like, I would love this type of thing to be in the Gambit movie, since his secondary mutation is that he's charming if you don't know that he has the mutation. Like, this would be the appropriate way. I acknowledge, because I'm used to it, because this is how women react to me. I'm not going to take advantage of it.
Right. And precisely, this is the direction that producers and directors need to take, because even in the scene where he recognizes he has this power and he uses it to save himself with plaster of Paris, he doesn't.
Well, and I mean, they even point out that he has a history with her.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He skirts the line, of not doing things
On the up and up.
But he does say to her, "Sorry,
Right.
it's not going to work out."
Right. And then she kicks his ass.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, she stabs his ass, but yeah.
Well, also true.
But like, and I mean, and it even comes up with like the fact that he flirts with death in both senses of the word.
Right. Who in the comic, actually that was a brilliant transition, because in the movie they make Lorelai to be deaf. In the comic, she actually was a siren who was, the creature that brings sailors to their death. So great interpretation, always having her in the water, like awesome way of putting that
making that
forward.
connection.
Yeah. Very, very cool. And I mean,
and they say that only sailors and cops can hear that line from one of the cops at the beginning.
Yep.
Right.
And that's kind of those two professions that are always kind of on the like one wrong step.
And it
takes
if
them
you
to
think
death.
about like most of the cop shows, cop movies, cop dramas are usually taking place in either LA, Chicago, or New York, Boston, all places that are right beside gigantic bodies of water.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
well, and I like that they put this, like, this is Central City, USA. It's really kind of pulling in that same kind of tradition as like DC uses of, we're going to call it this descriptive city name, but it's clearly a stand-in for this real world city. Like, Jen pointed out, this looks like Chicago. It feels like Chicago. And it being named Central City, well, Chicago's the most central metropolis that we have.
Right. I mean, the largest central metropolis, yeah, for sure. So, Mark, after reading this, I gotta ask, will you continue? If you're in Half Price Books or you're somewhere and you see a different Spirit comic, are you gonna pick it up?
Yeah, definitely. It's really got this kind of, I mean, it's definitely that noir genre, but it also has a bit more lightheartedness than some of the similar things like Dick Tracy, which or some of the more modern things like The Walking Dead. That
See, I got inspiration of Harry Dresden from it.
Really?
Honestly, yeah.
I got a lot of elements of like the Spirit. I mean, the Spirit walks a little bit more of that like ambiguous line, but Harry Dresden has the trying to do the right thing, which I don't think is as pulled out in the Spirit in either the comic or the movie, but he is, if you're looking at it, and that's the reason he turns down Plaster Paris, and that's the reason he's doing the things that he's doing.
I see the weird thing is, like, the feeling I got from the Spirit isn't necessarily that he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to stop the wrong things from being done, and it seems like a semantic issue, but it really kind of gives you a different feel of being a savior or a crime stopper.
Right. He's being reactive, not proactive.
Right. He's going after the octopus. Yes, he's going after, whatever villain who has whatever MacGuffin that's going to destroy or take over the city or the world or whatever. But everything he's doing, it isn't necessarily, like, the primary motivation isn't to save people, it's to stop the bad guy. For him, it's very much personal, a personal battle of, I'm stopping you. Yes, it's the right thing to do. And that's probably why. But I'm stopping the bad thing from being done as opposed to elevating the right thing.
No, that's fair. I can see that.
Yeah.
So, Bear, walking through someplace, there happens to be a Spirit comic. Are you gonna pick it up?
That depends. If it's original run, I might pick it up and thumb through it just to be like, have I read any of this stuff? And maybe stare at it until whatever shopkeeper tries to tell me that, listen, I gotta buy it. I can't just sit there and read it.
It's not a library.
Right? It's not a library. If it was something new, I would probably, if it was a new author that had picked it up and decided to do something with it, I might grab one just to see what was going on. But I think in general, like, as far as the older comic goes, I've got enough of a handle on it. I probably wouldn't like just grab, the older stuff off the shelf and add it to the collection. But if it's a new author, I mean, if there's a new movie, if they decide to do something else video wise, I would definitely be all over it.
Jen, you're walking through someplace, you see a Spirit comic that you don't think it's not the one that you read for this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested in picking it up?
I think I'm probably with Bear. I think that I would like to see, I think I'd like to see other media. I don't know that I would want to read anymore. I think I've got a pretty good handle on what the genre was.
Yeah, the original
and
run
the
stuff.
original intent. I would like to see, you know, if they did a TV show or
They did,
or
actually.
a radio drama.
There
or,
was a Spirit TV show,
Really?
actually.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
then maybe we should watch that. But the movie, and Bear, whenever you tell me that there's a movie that I should see, like, I don't know that you actually said, maybe you did when we were talking about doing this for the show. You were like, you guys really need to see this movie.
Yeah.
I believe you.
You trust me now?
Yeah, it was a
I
made.
never did before. But
It was a made-for-TV movie in 1987.
5 seasons later, she finally trusts me.
I think that should say something about your general level of trustworthiness.
You'd think.
As for me, I think I'm in the same boat. If there was newer stuff, I would pick it up just to see what they're doing with it. DC Comics actually owns the Spirit now.
I know it got published by Dark Horse for a while too.
Right. But I will put a caveat in there. If there was like an omnibus that I could pick up and use like a coffee table book or something like that. I mean, if I had a coffee
I
table.
was just gonna say you have to have a coffee table
Yeah.
first.
Right. But you know, in a different, larger house, like that would be kind of cool to have something like this as opposed to a Dick Tracy.
yeah, I'm not like I said, I grew up with Dick Tracy, and it's fine. I'm not slagging on Dick Tracy. It's
Right.
it's good for what it is, which is not my cup of tea.
Right.
Spirit, however, really resonated with me.
Right. So that might be something cool, like if you had a coffee table in the middle of your living room.
Well, or you know, a display table like the
right,
one
to
we
just
have.
have it there, and every once in a while be like, oh, okay, cool. Like,
You know, it comes up at the easel, at the display table that we never use that.
right. We just never use it. So,
And I'm with Jen on this. Like the Spirit definitely resonates more with me than like Dick Tracy. And I think part of that is also, I mean, part of it's the general tone is a little bit different. It's also the supernatural elements. The Spirit is not afraid to get weird.
well, I mean, yeah, Dick Tracy never went.
And yeah, hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, Dick Tracy never went full supernatural. Like weird things happen to people, and they are for some reason weird. But
Yeah.
it's not supernatural.
I guess I always kind of felt like Dick Tracy was America's answer to James Bond.
Yeah, but not even that. Not even that cool.
Yeah.
I mean, Dick Tracy was. It was.
He was supposed. I think he was supposed to be more relatable because, and I'm not. I'm. This is just
Yeah.
me speculating, of course, but it feels like he was designed to be more relatable because he was just a private eye as opposed to, you know, super spy.
Yeah, but
I mean,
I also,
and he
Well, he
definitely
was a
dealt
cop.
with like. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh no, I was just saying he was a cop. He wasn't a.
He-
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought he was actually. a
By the
criminal,
way.
but anyway.
he didn't say Josh.
Oh,
He
sorry.
said, "Go ahead, Jen."
Mm.
But I feel like if there was anything weird, and really, I don't remember there being that much weird in the Dick Tracy serial comic. It was
And-
like, oh yeah, and anything that was out of the norm was obviously a very sick individual. You know, it was. Not,
I mean, Dick Tracy had some of the like caricatures, like they had like
Yeah.
the flat top hammerhead, weird descriptive names that then got played into how the character was designed and drawn.
Yeah.
But they were evocative nicknames, not like supernatural powers.
right?
Right. It's not like Lorelei, who is literally a siren,
Yes.
Mm.
or
Yeah, Dick Tracy was more like it was just making nicknames because of their, you know, unfortunate appearance.
right, labelist, but okay.
Yeah.
So, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today, and taking your time to come on here and talk to us about the Spirit. Hope you had a good time.
Absolutely, it was my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, everyone, as we are going back and forth on our episodes between Rec Conversations and Graphically Novel, please tune in next week to the Rec Conversations episode that will be Bear and Luke doing World War Hulk.
Yeah.
Yay.
And then
I'm looking forward to that one personally.
And then in 2 weeks, we will be back with Lucas Green, and we will be talking Old Boy,
Right.
which we recorded before this, but
Yay.
it's in order. So until then, take it away, Vandello.
Come with me, I'll tell a story that you might have heard before. Graphically novel, but the same old trouble villains always knocking at the door. Pretty pictures on the page, but nothing ever stays the same. Do 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 do. Come at me, and I'll show you something you ain't never seen before. Right or wrong, oh can't we all just get along? My mask is no different than yours. Pretty pictures on the screen, but nothing's ever as it seems. Do 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 do. Hero or villain, loved or hated by millions. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right, but you don't want to see